Hey, welcome to A Real Point of View. And I'm your host, Greg Morgan, and I am joined by my co host, Mr. Steve, the critic who never picks a bad movie, and the always vivacious and charismatic Karen D, the must see movie maven, maven of the must see movies, maven of the movies out there. She's just a movie maven.
What are you in a loop?
I was in a movie maven loop.
Hello, hello, fellow critics.
We're here to critique just anything we can find that has to do with cinema. So, using cinema as the operative word here, this week we decided to talk about not just the films themselves, but the essence behind what makes these films so important in their interpretation and how we see film. And so it just made sense to talk about the cinematographers. Now, for those of you who don't know, cinematographers, they're the ones who actually take the stories that the screenwriters write and what the directors direct and actually give us additional essence of how the movie should be seen, the interpretation of what the director and the writers are really trying to convey with the storyline. You know, it's great to have a story. It's great to have your own imagination, but when you read a story, especially when you're reading a book, for example. But it's also important for the writer to get across what they're truly trying to get us to see, get us to understand, get us to notice with regard to the things that they've written. And then a director who truly understands that concept and is able to put the direction into how the actors are supposed to be, but also how the scenes are supposed to come across. And you can only do so much with a picture board. Now you've got to put this into motion, into reality, into what we call cinema, where now we get to see what they're talking about and see that interpretation. And it's important for the cinematographer to be on point with the writer and the director in order to convey those messages, convey that story, the true storyline that they want us to understand. And so cinematographers' job is to make sure that whatever they're trying to facilitate comes to fruition as we watch it as a consumer. So what I thought was really interesting and important about our cast this week was to try to find some cinematographers of popular note, some cinematographers who seem to have captured a lot of that essence. And so we found three different cinematographers, and so each one of us is going to talk about our cinematographer of the evening and just give you a simple idea of what works that they worked, movies that we think you should really see because of the cinematic essence, along with the great storyline and good direction. So I don't know. I think I want to pick who should go first, but I'm going to pick someone who I know has done some research for sure. All three of us have. But, let's start with you, Steve, this time.
Ooh, thank God it was Steve.
Steve is our critic at large and has been
Somebody
joining
wasn't
us,
listening.
and has been joining us here on A Real Point of View to give his opinions and to direct us to the right movies to watch. And so why don't we go ahead and start with you, Steve, and let us know who your cinematographer is and some of the movies that he's been involved in and what you thought about his portrayal or his ideas or vision that he's brought to the screen for us to enjoy.
The cinematographer I got was Roger Deakins. He's an English cinematographer. He was born May 24th, 1949. Um, a couple of the movies that he's been associated with are right up there with some of the best movies that people from my generation would have definitely seen. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Fargo, Unbroken, Prisoners, Skyfall, Shawshank Redemption. It just the list goes on and on and on and on and on from there with movies. He's hugely affiliated with the Coen brothers. They've done a lot of collaborations, together. As a matter of fact, he's just every movie he does gets a nomination for cinematography in one way or another. Just the way he's able to present what the writers are conveying, how the director, what direction the director wants to move in. Three of the movies that we're going to talk about are Prisoners, a movie with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. Skyfall, of course, James Bond, most recent and the last movie for Daniel Craig, and Unbroken, story about an Olympian who ended up being a part of World War II. First movie I'm going to start with is Prisoners and the way he did certain scenes. The direction they were really going for was to portray emotional point of view. They really wanted you to see the emotion of every single character, and in some of the characters, the lack of the emotion that was really there of what they were trying to do and how they were trying to portray it. They wanted to do seamless and very subtle transitions between scenes while keeping all the characters, together in ways that the storyline is moving along. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen any of these movies from here forward. The real emotion, Prisoners is about a father and his family. They go to Thanksgiving with another family that they're real close with. Two daughters from each family end up going missing. Not paying attention. They want to go outside, and they're headed back to a particular house to go play, and then they're coming back, but something goes wrong on the way back. The real subtle shots of the emotion on the parents' face when they're finally coming to grips and realizing that the children have been stolen. It's very close up. It's very when it's an outburst, it's a little bit more shot a little bit further back, so you can really feel their emotions being conveyed all over the scene, rather than just showing their face, and you see the anger or the sadness that's on their face, but you don't see how it reflects on everything else that's in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
He does a really good job with the direction of any person in this. They're all prisoners to the emotions that they're going through right now, but any scenes where people are prisoners, you don't see that person. You actually, they kind of take them out and take them away, unless they really have a main to show this character at this given point in time. They have information, or they have a look that they're showing you that's really directing you where they're going. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is Hugh Jackman's character has captured a man and is trying to beat information out of him. And they go to a scene where his face is covered up with a pillowcase. And so you don't really see what Hugh Jackman's done to him. And he's also in a bathroom, kind of hidden behind a sink. He's tied to the pipes underneath it. And they do the excellent job with the scene is you can't wait for the reveal to see what Hugh Jackman has done to try to get information out of this character in his sadness and in his rage. And even when they pull the pillowcase off, you still don't get the reveal. You still have to wait and use your imagination to get to try to create a picture, and then boom, they show you his face. They show the extent that Hugh Jackman has gone to try to get information out of this kid. It's really very well done in the scenes. There's a lot of it's really the emotional standpoint of the scenes that are done. The next movie, Skyfall. Skyfall was actually the second time he used a digital camera on sets and to capture all the film that's going on. Skyfall used a lot of long scenes. They did the shooting was 128 days, but all the shooting that they did, they tried to capture it all in one setting. So
Hmm.
the camera movements, there was a lot of distance in certain shots to where you could get all the information, even though you couldn't see really up close. But they still tried to transition to real close shots of emotional faces and how people were reacting in the scenes that they were doing. The last one, Unbroken, they they really wanted to bring the audience in to the characters' perspectives.
Hmm.
They really wanted to do more point of view, more what this person is seeing, more um, focusing on how you feel about his emotions and how you feel about what's happening to him and how you can almost feel what he's going through in these scenes because you're seeing it happen like he's seeing it happen. And there's a lot shorter shots than some of the movies that he's done, and not necessarily shorter. It's the transition is very quickly. It moves very quickly, but
Hmm.
when they get to a part of the story where they need to take their time and he needs to be needs to convey a lot more information, it still goes quickly, but you can feel it stretched out, and the camera angles they use are to convey the whole scene,
Hmm.
even though it's still from a point of view perspective.
Very cool.
And so that's kind of the way he likes to direct
So let me ask you
or
this
likes
real.
to do the cinematography.
So let me ask you this real quickly. As you're looking at these three films, which I thought were really really good movies myself, as you're looking at these three films, um, what about the cinematography made it special for you? What was it about it that made it um, keep your interest even more so than just the actual story itself? What was it about the his particular artistry helped you stay more a part of the film as you watch it?
It really was the very emotional shots and the care that was kind of take in delivering them, and how when a character full of rage or sadness or trying to overcoming the distance of the shot, like in Prisoners, the distance of the shot allowed you to see not just the face, not how the actor is trying to portray this character, but the body language of the actor portraying this character. And they really did good. They really did good motioning with the characters and how they moved while being able to take in all the surrounding area rather than just focus on the single person. I really felt like they did a good job with that. In Skyfall, his cinematography, the way he shot the scenes in Skyfall, they were long scenes. They were there was a distance that was in the scene, and you could see why there was a distance in the scene. The long walk of the reveal of Silva, Javier Javier Bardem's character. It's you're seeing it in James Bond. You are James Bond sitting in the chair that you're tied to, and you get to see him, the elevator come down, and you get to see the reveal as he slowly walks up and draws into your attention. Um, in Unbroken, the cutting and the seeing of the change in the character as they're going, they every little change is noticeable in the way they shoot all the scenes and the way they put everything together. For how long he's trapped on that raft in the ocean, moving to the POW camp. You see they really did a good job shooting everything about the characters as you're seeing them and the change that they're going through, and the point of views were really what drew my attention.
Very cool. Again, so if you'd be so kind, so Skyfall, which is a James Bond thriller, Unbroken, which is the true story of a military aviator who sadly just recently passed away. But nevertheless, not just a hero in the military sense, but also an Olympic hero of sorts too. And the other movie, Prisoners with Hugh Jackman, and just a very volatile film. And I like the shadowing in that film, making the dark people seem darker in their nature, and feeling that they had to do what they were about to do. I actually like that too. Pretty good. Well, thanks, Steve. Appreciate that, brother. So Karen, you had even just as daunting a task as all three of us, really, to come up with things about your particular cinematographer. So can you tell us who your cinematographer is and what his achievements are, and what you noticed in the films that drew you in, that kept you focused on what was really going on in each drama?
Sure. My cinematographer is Emmanuel Lubezki. He's also known as Chivo Lubezki. And he is extremely accomplished. He is the only individual and the first cinematographer ever to win an Academy Award 3 years in a row.
Wow.
He won for Gravity in 2013. He won for Birdman and in 2014, and then he won for he won for Gravity, then he won for Birdman, then he won for Revenant in 2015. And something that doesn't normally happen to cinematographers, Leonardo DiCaprio thanked him in his acceptance speech.
Wow.
So
I bet it was for the bear. I bet it was for the bear.
No, it probably wasn't for the bear. Thank you for not letting the bear eat me, Leonardo.
Gotta give the bear those sugar crisps, because that's the only thing that keeps them away from people.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
Okay, that was a blast from the way past. Okay.
Yes. But yeah, he's in his early 50s. He's from Mexico. He's actually a personal friend of Alfonso Cuarón. Other films he worked on: Children of Men, Y Tu Mama Tambien, I think, like Water for Chocolate as well. He's extremely accomplished. And I would say that he's the master of the long shot. If I was going to say anything specific about him, about his art form, it's that. Gravity is one of my favorite films. It's with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney and some other people. But who cares, because it's really about Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. But Gravity is the story of astronauts who are on a mission, and something happens to their spacecraft, and Sandra Bullock ends up being alone in the spacecraft, basically marooned, and she's desperately trying to get back to Earth before she runs out of oxygen and food and everything, and dies, of course. And spoiler alert, everybody else, dies, which is why she was alone, I guess. Maybe that's not a spoiler alert, but anyway, So she's alone. She's alone in the space.
She wasn't spoiled for sure.
Very.
What else? She was alone in the spacecraft, and this movie, this is a movie to me. I guess I'll just start with this one. People either love it or hate it. I'm one of the lovers of this movie, but it's, you know, you really have to just go all in on this movie. You just have to surrender to the movie, and there were a lot of people that just said, well, there wasn't enough happening in the movie and it was too long, and yeah, I really, you know, Sandra Bullock is hot, but how much more of her can I take of her being in a spacecraft alone forever? I don't care how hot she is, and that kind of stuff. To me, this was an extremely artistic movie, and the opening scene of the movie was one long shot, and it was just masterful. It just totally drew you in. And the point of the movie, one of the points of the movie, is the vastness of space. There's a saying, an old seaman saying, like kind of like almost a prayer about, you know, please protect me from, you know, from the sea, because the sea is so wide and my boat is so small. Something along those lines. It's a very, very old saying, kind of prayer for sailors. And, you know, astronauts think of themselves as sailors too. They're just sailors in space. And one of the points of the movie is the vastness of space juxtaposed against these tiny humans who actually think they're going to conquer it. The audacity of that. Mm-hmm. And so, to me, his job as cinematographer was to, you know, convey this and almost relentlessly, you know, so that you as the audience member also start to feel the vastness and to feel your smallness in comparison to the vastness of the universe.
Right.
And I think what he did was absolutely, totally brilliant. He just was. And it wasn't like you sat there, at the movie going, oh my God, what an amazing shot. No, it wasn't that. It was just that you got sucked into this, you know, vacuum of space, and you were right there with Sandra Bullock, just, you know. And I know there were times when I was watching that movie when I was like short of breath, right? You know, I, you know, just was anxious about whether I was going to make it, you know, even though I wasn't there, because that's how well done this movie was. There's a reason why this movie, I believe this movie also won this movie also won for Best Picture in the same year, because I don't know what other word I can pick besides brilliant. It was just brilliant. And to do these shots, especially in gravity, you know, you have these huge models that you need to set up, and they had a huge rig, and Sandra Bullock was actually being controlled by puppeteers in this rig. And Lubezki is quoted as saying, I couldn't stand being in that rig more than a few minutes, but Sandra Bullock was there for hours. Because she's an athlete and she's an artist, and she's, you know, she's amazing. She will do what needs to be done to get this movie made. In another movie, the movie from which he most recently won the Academy Award, The Revenant, with Leonardo DiCaprio, where he got thanked by the star in his own acceptance speech. everyone talks about the bear scene, right? And I know I often said on a number of occasions that I was voting for the bear. I was rooting for the bear.
I did.
Yeah. So
The bear did an amazing job.
I thought so.
It felt very real coming from the bear.
And when the bear was talking about his muse, he also cited Lubezki for being his muse throughout the whole film.
The bear thanked Lubezki as well, right? When the bear got his acceptance speech, when he got his Academy Award, he thanked Lubezki as well. I missed that part of the Academy Awards ceremony.
No.
Maybe that was during the Creative Awards.
Actually, he was on Jimmy Kimmel, but that's neither here nor there. But the bear was cited as saying something to the effect of "Rah, rah, rah, rah." And I took that as interpretation from another bear, the Chicago Bears. Okay, I know senseless plug.
Oh,
a team that really needs help right now.
my.
But yeah, the bear was like important to the whole scene.
Yeah. Anyway. Anyway, okay, so the bear scene, and so this is a pretty hard scene to watch, and you know, because it's so graphic, but also because Lubezki is so good at what he does. So what did he do this time? What did he sort of do this time that was kind of different? Well, again, I looked to what he said in his own interviews, and what he said about that particular shot was he thought it was very important to get the sense of the viewpoint of Leonardo DiCaprio's character, and just the sense, and nature was actually a character in this film as well. You know, just the environment was a huge character in this film. So he thought it was very important to get that sense. So the camera shots were done with that in mind. And he said that when he was trying to figure out what to do with the bear shot, he happened to see this video that had been shot of a person who fell into like a cage at a zoo and got attacked by a bear. And somebody shot the attack, which I guess really hurt the person who fell into the bear cage. But anyway, so it didn't end well for the person who actually fell into the cage. But what Lubezki, who's ever the cinematographer, noticed was that the video, the raw video that the person took, was extremely, you know, visceral and just, you know, riveting and all this stuff. And so he said, well, why is that? And he said, well, one reason is that there weren't multiple cuts. Like previously, when you have like animal shots, the general technique used is to do a lot of multiple cuts to create the, you know, the illusion of action, and to sort of create this illusion of, you know, terror and you know, all of this stuff that's going on, to create sort of like this vortex of action. You do that with multiple cuts, and that happens post-production. And he said, okay, I don't want to do that because I want it to seem as if it's happening. I want it to look as if it's happening to him, and I want the audience to feel as if it's happening to them. So instead of doing the multiple cuts to create that impression, he went in the exact opposite direction, did one long, really long cut. And that worked. That, because all anybody could talk about was the bear scene. And also Leonardo DiCaprio, and great acting and a great picture. But besides that, they really talked about the bear scene. So I would say he's very successful in that. he said that he wanted to feel like that you were walking with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I think he did that. And I think with Birdman, this movie starred Michael Keaton, Edward Norton. It's a hilarious movie, just hilarious, about these crazy, about this man who's just goes completely stark raving mad while they're in the middle of doing like a play. They're in the middle of this. Michael Keaton plays an actor who's making this huge comeback after years of being absent from movies. He was a movie star. He's trying to make this huge comeback in this Broadway play, and it just goes completely berserk. And so does Michael Keaton, by the way. And so that was the premise of the movie. And this was different. I mean, Gravity is like this really long drama. This drama, I don't even know. I'm not even sure what the right word for it is, but extremely dramatic and almost kind of like I almost had the word, but it's like one long sort of, I can't think of the word, but anyway, it's one long movie. And then you have the
word for it.
And then you have The Revenant, which is also another long movie with a bear. So Birdman has all these people in it, and it's a comedy, except that there's a lot of pathos. There's a lot of pathos in the comedy.
Well, before you continue, Karen, and I apologize because I'm not as familiar with the term, what does pathos actually mean?
Pathos means that there's like a lot of well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of funny moments, but they're really tinged with a lot of sadness, or there's like an overwhelming sort of sense of sadness or tragedy that kind of is also goes with the movie. Okay. Not the movie, but goes with the comedy. So that's what I mean by pathos, just like a sense of tragedy. And there were a lot of tragedies that occurred in Birdman.
Right.
So and trying to shoot, and I guess in that particular film, he's shooting a comedy, but there's also this, there's also, I think the big thing that cinematographers are trying to decide, the huge question that they all face right now, is digital or film. Mm-hmm. And Lubezki, for example, on The Revenant, he went with digital for a specific reason, because he said that film, a lot of filmmakers think that film gives more realistic look to their movies, but he said in this instance, since he wanted the audience to feel like they were right there, the graininess that comes with film stock would take away from that, not add to it. And what he wanted was a clear vision of the mountains, the trees, the character, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, dealing with the elements and that sort of thing. And also they were shooting at night. And in fact, I think The Revenant, I was going to talk about Birdman, but I went right back to Revenant. So sorry about that. But let me get back to Revenant for a second, because I do want to mention that I think this might be the first film where they were actually able to get off a shot that was totally black. And that's like an amazing achievement. And I can't even explain how amazing it is, but trying to get a sense of a picture in total blackness is something that it eludes photographers everywhere, amateur, professional, whatever. And he was able to pull that off. but he would say it's because I use digital, you know, and did not go with film, you know, and I think with Birdman there was even more of a question about digital versus cinema because digital was still, I mean, digital it's a very well developed medium, less so in 2014 when Birdman was done. And film has, I think what's happened is that you have this weird situation where cinematographers have used film for more than 100 years, you know, or about 100 years, I guess. They use film, and film has done well. Film has served its masters well, and there's nothing wrong with film. But then digital comes along, and kind of film gets dropped like a hot potato. And there's this movement to digital, except the digital is not as good as film because the technology isn't there. It's not like digital just became this fully developed art form immediately. There was a process of development that needed to happen, but the rush to drop film and move to digital kind of, you know, that got left in the dust in the rush. So so you had that with Birdman too. You know, do you shoot digital? Do you shoot film? You know, if you're shooting a comedy, what are the best shots to use? And especially if, you know, you have all of this really crazy stuff going on, which is just laugh out loud funny, but at the same time, you've got this aura of sadness. How do you convey that in the shots? And I think he really did that well. But again, in interviews that he's given, he has said that he was concerned about how he was shooting Birdman because he felt that people were too focused on the shots that he was taking. Wow, that's a great angle, or, you know, that's an amazing, you know, viewpoint, perspective, whatever. And he will say, like so many cinematographers will say, if the audience is focused on the movie, then the cinematographer, if the audience is focused on the shot, the cinematographer has not done his or her job. Because the job of the cinematographer is to make sure that the audience is focused on the movie, not on each individual shot or how it's got made. I mean, you know, the film composer will say the same thing. If the audience is focused on on this particular strain of music in the movie, then the musicians and the composers haven't done their job, because it all is supposed to work seamlessly. But I'm sure that the director of Birdman would say that it did work seamlessly. And I know when I saw the movie, I didn't focus on the shots. I was caught up in the manic craziness that was going on. I think that's what Lubezki wanted. I think he succeeded, because I know for me, that's where I was. I wasn't focused on individual shots. I was focused on the movie, and, you know, and how could all these crazy things be happening to one person or by one person in one, you know, evening. Mm-hmm. So he's an amazing cinematographer.
Yeah, I've seen the majority of those films that you mentioned here. Actually, I've seen all three of those films. And then some of the ones that you mentioned, in addition to, I've seen some of those and some I haven't, but I'm pretty impressed with his work. And one of the things about Revenant that I really enjoyed so much was the seamlessness. I went from scene to scene to scene without it feeling like I was doing that. It felt like it was just one movement, one motion, one essence of this guy's life and situations as they found. One of the things I liked in Revenant, going to that movie especially, was, you know, we always see the scenes in many of the Westerns where there's a chase scenes. Chase scenes seem to be a big deal for people for some reason, not just cars but horses in these cowboy movies. And the scene where Leonardo DiCaprio's character has to rush and jump on a horse, and he's racing to get away from the Native Americans that are chasing him. And you see the movement of the horse. You see his movement, the jerking. Like that's really you on that horse riding to try to get away. And I love the fact that early in the film and also in this particular chase scene, how arrows are flying by like they would fly by you. You know,
the whizzing.
Yeah, in other films you see it happening in front of you. There'll be horses going, and you'll see gunshots and all this stuff. But rarely do you see anything whizzing by, and you hear the whistle of the arrows or the whistle of the bullets flying by. And also when they actually, meet their mark. And I thought that was pretty interesting in this film. Getaway scenes are a lot in this particular film. The boat getting away from being attacked on the shore, while you're in the boat being attacked from the shore as the boat's moving, while he was trying to get away from the horde that was after him. It made you feel a little bit more a part of the film without it being in 3D.
Right.
A lot of digital stuff these days are kind of 2D. 3D is what we're getting a lot of anymore, and but it gave you a sense of almost being there. And I think that added an element of fear and anticipation to the film. And even in Birdman was an illustration of a guy who was going through a mental and emotional breakdown, while also trying to survive and re-bolster his career. And even in the shots of the actual Birdman behind him as his alter ego, because of a character that he had played for many years prior, just added to that effect. Now he's not just being controlled by his own thoughts, he's being controlled by the one thing that he's trying to get rid of, the stigma of, and that's the Birdman.
Right.
So very emotionally packed, and the cinematography helps give you the essence of what's really going on in this guy's head, and you're thinking, man, I do not want to be in this guy's head.
Right. except that you can't help but be in that guy's head because of just right. And again, and I think, he conveyed that, he helped that because, like I said, he's the master of the long take. He did a lot of long takes in that movie too, which is kind of interesting because, when you're filming what's ostensibly what's a quote unquote a comedy, to me, comedy is kind of symbolized by a lot of short takes, quick, because it's like, you have to be quick-witted and you have to be Johnny on the spot and, all those sorts of other kind of analogies that lend themselves to, you look at this person, then you look at that other person for the reaction, or then you go somewhere else, and then this other place is funny, so you go there. So that does not lend itself to a long take. It lends itself to much shorter takes, and like multiple camera shots from different angles and that kind of thing. But he again sort of played the opposite and said, well, we're going to do one long take. And part of I think what lent itself to that was that this was kind of a movie within a movie, because you have, you had the movie of watching Michael Keaton's descent, but then you have this Broadway play going on, which was the other movie.
Right.
So, so he used a long take to convey these two worlds. And again, just very interesting approach, because with two worlds, you would think, well, you need a lot of shots for that, but no, not necessarily, apparently.
Yeah, he infused the I'll say the togetherness of these two projects in one. Just by like even going from stage to hallway to dressing room to psycho babble to almost jumping out a window kind of scenarios,
Yes.
all in one fell swoop, and it, that was kind of cool, kind of different.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It almost seems like very perspective oriented.
Mm-hmm. It is. I think.
You can hear me, but I cannot hear you guys.
It's
I'm having a little
like
technical difficulty on my own because I have no
Oh,
idea what
that's-
you're saying. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Can you hear us?
guys.
What'd you do? What'd
You-
you do?
According
He
to
broke it.
your microphone, you're on.
Shannon broke it.
I am not hearing you. Well, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. On my end, I'm having a little technical difficulty, so I'm glad you guys can still hear me.
Well, Steve, of course, Gregory can't hear me say that Steve was
maybe
talking.
you guys can write me on the wall here in our system to help me out a little bit.
Okay.
Well,
Steve, you go ahead. I'll send Greg a message.
Okay, I was just gonna say that the Birdman. I have not seen the movie yet, but it seems very perspective oriented in these long cut scenes. Like they're trying to give you the perspective of him moving in and out of like the movie behind him, the movie inside of the movie behind him is changing as he's moving from scene to scene to scene, but the perspective is for you to get everything he's trying to convey while he's moving from all these scenes, rather than just going from cut in the hallway, cut on the stage while doing the play, cut out in the street, and stuff like that. It seems like he's trying to make sure that in the scene that he's shooting, that you're getting all of this information without having to move you from spot to spot to spot to spot.
Right. Right.
That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good take on it, and I think that's some of what was going on. Definitely.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed so far is Roger Deakins, my cinematographer and your cinematographer have in common. They like long, fluid scenes and without a lot of cutting, and they also really do like emotional point of view portrayals in movies. It seems like they both want to. They like going in that direction and. Really using the long scenes to portray that the way to do that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. If
only
ahead.
Greg could hear us and get ready to go.
Oh my goodness. Well, why don't I give him a cue to do that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Since he can't
hear us.
He can talk, but he can't hear.
Us. Greg, you have glasses. Ha 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 ha.
I typed please stop talking instead of start. Oops, that was a Freudian slip. Okay. Okay, I just sent him a message.
Well, if you can hear me out there, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can.
We can.
So I'm having difficulty on my end, but just to give you kind of an overview, each of us was given a different different cinematographer. So my cinematographer is he's not quite as known as the latter two cinematographers, but he's an up and coming cinematographer, and his name is Bradford Young. More recently, a movie that Bradford Young was associated with filming is the movie Selma. Now, on our show in the past, we've talked about a lot of different actors that follow directors, and that have directors that have their stable of actors that follow them. In this case, it's a little different. We have a situation where, in this case, Bradford Young is the cinematographer that follows a very poignant in the film industry um, uh, director in Ava DuVernay, who is the director of Selma. So this guy basically more or less got his start as an indie cinematographer, indie films, independent films, and has a long relationship with Ava DuVernay. He worked on her film, Middle of Nowhere, which was one of her earlier films. Not quite as known, but a very good film. And then, of course, he worked on another controversial film called Pariah, which deals with sexuality and homelessness and um, mental issues. But what's really cool about this guy is, in my opinion, is he's more of a simplistic kind of a cinematographer in that he starts small and then broadens the term. So like as Karen was alluding to before, the long scene in her films that she was referring to, here for Bradford Young, what I noticed in watching the films, he goes from the small simplistic and then moves his way out and then moves himself around a scene. A good example of this is when in Selma, Martin Luther King and his wife are talking. We go from them, you hear their voices talking, and you see the room, and then you see her helping him with his tie, and then it broadens out and it becomes a bigger room, and the voices fill the room, and now you see the people who are talking. And it just is a nice transformation, nice evolution within the scene as you get broader and broader. In Middle of Nowhere, the two characters are in a prison. The main character, the male, is in prison, and so his dutiful wife comes to visit him and support him and keep him positive because he's at that point where he's going to get out soon. And it basically starts with her in the room, and then it goes big, and then it goes small to her hands on the table, and then his hands on the table, and then it goes back out to the two of them. You hear them talking, and they're talking, and now he's starting to sweep around the room around them, and so you're in the total space of their conversation, and then he catches from on one shoulder the eyes of one looking at the other, and then the next scene is from the other shoulder looking to the other. And he does this throughout many of his films to express the conversation, to express the small to the large. We see in Selma where you'll see different characters talking, and then all of a sudden it gets bigger and the room gets bigger and bigger. And then the characters get bigger within the room. He is conveying all these different things in the emotion in the room. And so to me, as I'm watching this, I'm still riveted because I know that I'm going to see these, eventually see in the different scenes, what I call an evolution of scene. The vision that he's portraying in all these different films is the vision of small to big, big to small. But in those poignant moments where it being small is important to the film. And then taking that smallness and being large. You hear a lot of times politicians and or theologians talking about how our existence is, we're not the only ones here. Our existence is things that are out there that are bigger than ourselves. He helps bring that out in the different segments of the films, i.e. like in Selma, where, Martin Luther King is trying to, get people's attention. And it starts off with the voice from the podium up to his face, and then broadens out. It is not just him just talking to us, but he's talking to all these people in this room. It's the stage. And then after the stage, you start seeing the people in the pews, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and continues to get bigger. And so you realize that what he's talking about, what he's conveying to the people is, again, bigger than himself. And it just really helps the movie. Throughout the movie, you see that realm. And I really enjoy that in his films. And now he has a new film coming out called The Arrival. It actually
Oh,
comes out this month.
yes.
And in this particular film, you're talking about, again, now we have a subject matter that are people in situations that are bigger than ourselves, in this entity that comes to Earth. And they're trying to figure out, is it a friendly entity? Is it a not friendly entity? Getting scientists and people involved to try to figure it out. And everything that you see initially in the film is very homey, small town. You know, everything's going fine, and all of a sudden now you see all these jets are flying around. Well, you know, this is not common. And so now we're going from the bottom view up into the air, up into the what's going on in the air. And now we see this entity from a distance. You can tell that it's ominous. So you know, the closer you get, the larger this is going to be. And then is this thing getting larger and larger and bigger and bigger? And so now you understand the concept of, again, bigger than ourselves. And I think that kind of plays within the realms of how he's seeing and envisioning these things, going from the simplistic to the overwhelming, seemingly. And of course, obviously, with regards to what the director is looking for him to do. And so, as I stated before, here's a guy who is a stablemate of a director who's a fine director, and in her own right is starting to get accolades. And he has worked on a lot of projects and still works on projects with her. And now he's going to be going into another phase where he's going to be working with Lucas in the new Star Wars film called Han Solo, which will be coming out in I think, 2018, where he's going to take this one character and try to broaden the horizon for us to understand and get into the realms of Han Solo as a younger man prior to what we've seen him in the Star Wars universe so far. I really like his approach. I like going from small to the big, understanding the importance of the little things. Now, there's another film that he's involved in, which is A Violent Year.
Oh, yeah.
A Most Violent Year. Here we have a guy who's an immigrant, comes to the country trying to make good, marries the woman of his dreams he's felt, and everything seems to be going well. He has a company, which is a trucking company, that he's really trying to get off the ground and make strides. And he's one of those people that's doing the right thing all the time, every day. And then other entities outside of those realms of control start to change that and cause issues with that. The union is causing issues with that. And his approach is we can ride this out and continue to do the right thing. His wife's approach is we need to be aggressive because we shouldn't let none of this stuff happen. Well, he's the guy who's on the side where, he wants to do things. He tries to go through legal ways to get things done and everything. And his wife supports him, but she comes from a different background. She does have a criminal element in her family's background. So she's more of the tough guy early on in the film. Well, here's a guy that when you're trying to film all the things that are going on, one of the cool things about this film is it's not necessarily just big and small. Now it's light and day, dark and light. Early in the film, the good things happen in the daytime. The good things happen in the light. As the film progresses and evolves to the more shady things starting to occur, the shady things are happening at night. And then there's a slow transition. Now the bad things are happening in the daytime. His trucks are being hijacked. His drivers are being manipulated and injured. It's starting to happen in the daytime. Another thing happens at night where someone tries to scare them, scare tactics at night, and he finds this guy and he's chasing after him, can't catch him. the next day, his wife is in the daytime talking, and their children are out front, and the wife notices that the youngest daughter has a gun in her hand that she found in the bushes. So now the transition is good is not always light. Sometimes there's evil in the light, and there's good in the dark. So the cinematographer taking these transitions and the director directing them to show the differences and the evolution, it seems very seamless. But I was noticing that, and it actually helped me in the film because now I see the transition. And that's so subtle at first, and then it becomes so much more dramatic later. So really enjoyed the films that this particular cinematographer has been involved in.
Yeah,
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for listening and watching us today. Unfortunately, because of our own cinematic errors that are happening in our show today, we've lost a little audio and then lost one of our critics because of it. But you know what? We still go on, and we appreciate you hanging out with us and staying with us throughout the rest of the show. So thanks again for listening and watching. We hope that our conversation tonight has been helpful with regard to the different films that we discussed, but even more, that we get you to notice and understand that it's not just the writers and the directors, but it's the cinematographer that helps us understand and see things in a different light, adding their vision alongside the vision of their peers in order to bring us that wonderful market piece, that film that we're able to watch and enjoy. So
I would even say
see if you can see the films by Lubezki, films by Deakins, and films by Young that they are involved in. It seems to me, as we noted tonight, they're doing a really good job, and it seems like the films that they're involved in seem to be very entertaining. Karen, do you have anything else that you'd like to add to this before we get out of here?
Yeah, just in leaving, I just want to say that to me, the cinematographer's job is, it's not only their vision. I think even more importantly, they help the director to realize his or her vision. And sometimes the director has these ideas in mind, but they're looking for the most effective way to convey them, the most dramatic way, the way that causes the audience to feel something. And the director always wants you to feel something. If you leave the theater and you haven't felt anything, then the director's failed. So the cinematographer and the director work hand in hand to help you to make an emotional connection to their storytelling and their movie. So anyway, I just want to say that, and also add my thanks for you all joining us. And we're going to get these technical issues solved. We're going to fire our cinematographer too. And then so that we can come back next week with a real point of view.
And I just got that last part. So, yes, and please try to join us next week, as Karen alluded to, here on A Real Point of View. So thanks again, everybody, for hanging out, and we appreciate you. And definitely get out and see these films that these gentlemen have worked on. And if you can, let us know what you think in our comment section on our YouTube channel at A Real Point of View. We thank you again for listening and watching, and have a good night.